Grace was sipping her morning coffee while her 8-year-old son, Max, ate his cereal. Out of nowhere, Max said something that left her stunned. "Mom, guess what? I saw Dad yesterday," Max said casually. Grace's heart began to race. "What do you mean, sweetie?" she asked, her voice shaky. "At KFC. He was working there. I saw him when Jill and I went for lunch," Max replied, not realizing how shocking his words were. Grace stared at Max, her mind flashing back to 3 years ago when they had buried her husband, Scott. He had supposedly passed away in the hospital after a short illness, or had he? "Are you sure it was Dad?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. Max nodded confidently. "He even smiled at me." Grace's mind raced. Could Scott still be alive? But why would he be working at KFC? How could this even be possible? Later that day, Grace found herself sitting in her car outside the local KFC, watching people come and go. She felt foolish, but she had to know for sure. Could there have been a mistake? Finally, unable to wait any longer, she walked into the KFC, her eyes scanning the employees behind the counter, desperately searching for any sign of her late husband. As she glanced at the staff, he wasn't there. She sighed in relief, realizing her son must have seen someone else. Perhaps it was someone who resembled Scott, and Max mistook him for his father. Grace left the KFC, prepared to explain to her son that he had seen another person. But would Max still insist he saw his father? When she got home, she sat down with him. "Max, I went to the KFC where you said you saw your father. Unfortunately, I didn't see him there, honey. Could you have mistaken someone else for him?" Grace asked. Max looked at his mother, puzzled. "No, Mom, it was him. It was Dad. I know what my dad looks like, and that was definitely him, even though his name tag said Steve." This convinced Grace even more that Max had seen someone else. The person had a different name. "You see, it wasn't him. Your dad's name was Scott, remember?" But this wouldn't be the last time Grace heard about it. Grace met Scott for the first time on a crisp autumn day during college. She was deep into her studies in the library when he approached her table, juggling a precarious stack of books. Their eyes locked, and Grace couldn't ignore the mischievous sparkle and boyish grin on his face. "Need a hand?" he asked, chuckling and gesturing toward the books. Grace smiled, charmed by his relaxed demeanor. She had no idea that this unexpected encounter would profoundly alter her life's path. While collaborating on a group project, Grace realized that Scott was much more than just a charming face. He was intelligent, witty, and deeply passionate about his studies. They spent countless hours in debates, discussions, and exploring profound philosophical questions. Their friendship soon evolved into something deeper, and Grace found herself falling deeply in love with Scott. After graduation, Scott surprised Grace with a romantic weekend in the countryside. They walked through meadows, laughing as the sun set. Then Scott knelt with a small velvet box and proposed. Overwhelmed with joy, Grace said yes. Their wedding day was magical, surrounded by loved ones, as they vowed to love each other forever. When their son Max was born, their happiness grew even more. Parenthood brought joy, and they adored watching Max grow. But when Max was 5, Scott fell ill. What started as a cough quickly worsened, and doctors couldn't find a diagnosis. Grace stood by Scott's side, balancing work and caring for their family. Despite his strength, Scott's health declined, and he passed away one quiet evening surrounded by family. Grace struggled with the grief, especially when doctors insisted on a closed casket at his funeral due to the mysterious illness. Friends and family offered support, but life without Scott was tough. The house felt empty, and Grace and Max had to adjust to their new reality. They found solace in work, studies, and counseling, slowly learning to cope and honor Scott's memory. Fast forward 2 years, and Grace and Max were doing well, until Max mentioned that he had seen his father working at KFC. The thought began to bother Grace every time she thought about it. How could it be? She hadn't even gotten to see him then, as the doctors were afraid that what he had might be contagious. Grace never really saw her husband's body, and life had settled into a new normal for her and Max. They had found ways to honor Scott's memory while moving forward. But everything changed today. Max claimed he saw his father. Grace's heart sank as she listened to Max's story, her mind racing with questions and doubts. That night, Grace lay awake, replaying Max's words over and over in her mind. The next morning, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't rest until she had answers. Grace was peacefully asleep when she heard something that made her jolt awake. Groggily, she looked at the disturbance and noticed it was her cell phone. Picking it up, she saw she had missed a call from an unknown number. Her blood went cold. Who would phone her this late at night? Then it happened again. The phone rang, but this time she was ready to answer. "Hello? What do you want?" Grace said groggily, her patience worn thin. There was a brief silence before a voice, soft and trembling, responded. "Is this Grace?" Grace had no idea who it was. "Yes," she said hesitantly. "Who is this?" The person on the other side of the call seemed unwilling to give away that information. "Let's just call me a friend. I'm giving you a warning. Don't investigate any further," the voice cryptically told her. Then, just as abruptly as the call had started, they hung up. Grace put her phone down, and a shiver ran up her spine. Could Scott still be alive? In the days following the mysterious call, Grace couldn't shake off a persistent sense of dread. With each passing moment, her curiosity deepened. That morning, Grace awoke with a strange feeling in the pit of her stomach. She was almost certain that her son was wrong, but what if he wasn't? That morning, she called her sister and asked if she could babysit Max. She wanted to investigate the matter on her own. Jill arrived at 10:00 a.m., and Grace quickly left, unaware of what she was about to discover. The drive to KFC felt endless. When she arrived, she scanned the workers behind the counter, but didn't spot anyone resembling Scott. Feeling uneasy, she ordered a takeaway coffee and sat down to wait. Suddenly, she noticed a man. As she turned toward him, he quickly looked away, trying to hide his face, but it was too late. Grace had already seen him. Her heart raced. Even from a brief glance, she was certain it was the face of the man she once loved. Could it really be Scott, or just someone who looked like him? She knew she had to see his face again to be sure. She slowly pushed her chair back and got up, but she was not prepared for what was about to happen. As soon as the man heard her chair push out from under the table, he bolted. He headed straight for the door and ran out. Wait, her voice echoed through the small room as she rose to her feet and decided to run after him. Why was he running? In that moment, she wondered if Max had been right. At first, she thought the man only resembled her husband, but if that were the case, why would he run? As Grace rushed out of the cafe, she ran after the man, desperate to catch up with him and maybe get a proper look at his face, but she paused hopelessly in the middle of the parking lot. The man was gone, and she had no idea who he really was. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Grace confided in Jill again. I can't shake the feeling that there's something we're missing, she admitted. Max was so sure it was Scott. What if he's right? Jill listened patiently, then suggested, maybe we should look into Scott's medical records and the circumstances around his death. It might help put your mind at ease. Grace agreed. She visited the hospital and requested Scott's medical records. The staff were sympathetic, and after a brief wait, she was handed a thick file. As she sat in the hospital cafeteria poring over the documents, a sense of dread filled her. The records confirmed Scott's illness and his deteriorating condition, but something caught her eye, a note about a transfer request. Scott had been moved to a different ward just days before his death. Grace's heart pounded as she read further, uncovering inconsistencies in the timeline. Grace shared her findings with Jill. There's something strange about the way Scott's transfer was handled, she said, her voice shaky. What if he didn't die? What if he was moved somewhere else for some reason? That's a huge leap, Grace, Jill replied. But if you really believe there's something to it, we should investigate further, maybe talk to the doctors who treated him. Grace and Jill scheduled meetings with the doctors who had treated Scott. Most of them confirmed the details in the medical records, but one doctor seemed hesitant, avoiding eye contact and offering vague answers. After the meeting, Grace felt more convinced than ever that there was a deeper story. He knows something, she told Jill. I'm sure of it. We need to keep digging. Grace's determination to uncover the truth led her to investigate further. She spent hours scouring through old hospital records and talking to anyone who might have known Scott during his illness. Finally, she stumbled upon a crucial piece of information, a nurse who remembered Scott vividly. He was moved to a different facility, the nurse revealed. It was all very secretive. With this new information, Grace intensified her search. Her efforts paid off when she found a retired doctor who revealed something unusual about Scott's case. He wasn't as sick as we thought, the doctor admitted. There was something strange about the whole situation. Could Scott have faked his illness and death? Grace asked to speak with the facility manager. When he appeared, Grace froze. It was Scott. He looked older, but it was him. Scott. Grace's voice shook with anger and heartbreak. How could you do this? Scott's face turned pale, struggling for words, but Grace pressed on. Max saw you. He thought you were dead. We thought you were dead. Scott finally spoke. Grace, I'm sorry. There's so much you don't know. Scott then confessed he had faked his death to escape his life. He had another family nearby, a woman named Lisa and 2 children. Feeling trapped, he saw no other way out. Grace's anger overflowed. How could you abandon us like that? Do you know what you put us through? Scott lowered his head in shame. I'm sorry, Grace. I never meant for it to go this far.